Okay, so today we are on lesson 7, which is our final lesson on the medieval period for medicine. So today's lesson is a review on why there was such little change during the Middle Ages, because what we focused on in our first lesson, and the whole point, the whole theme of medicine is to be able to understand continuity and change. So for today's lesson, what we're looking at is why was there such little change during the Middle Ages? And essentially what we're doing is we're evaluating the key reasons why there wasn't really much medical progress during the Middle Ages. So by the end of today's lesson, you should be able to identify the key factors important to understanding medicine in the Middle Ages. So that's from our medicine factors, thinking about what is relevant to progress in the Middle Ages. You should be able to explain the role of each factor, and we are working towards making links between each one. So we've spoken about these factors a few times in lesson 1, and then again when we were doing the lesson on understanding and explain why question. So it's really important that throughout this course you are able to really just memorize these factors, because they are things that you need to understand continuity and change in medicine. So just to kind of explain, for this particular section of the course, so for medieval medicine, we're focusing on 5 particular factors, and they are attitudes, respect for tradition. So the fact that, it's just not what's done. People are quite conservative in that they don't want to challenge the old ideas of Galen, they don't want to challenge the church. There's this respect for tradition, which you should probably be able to see from the fact that in university they're still studying Galen. Dissection is used to prove what Galen said, not to find out new discoveries. Another factor is education. So the idea of the church being in complete control of education and how that might have limited progress. This goes hand in hand with the church, which is our biggest factor for medieval medicine, really, in terms of when we're thinking about progress during the Middle Ages. Role of individuals, and then the institution being the government, so thinking about how they've kind of reacted to the Black Death and their decisions that they make. Also thinking about, when we're thinking about limited progress, we need to think back to our very first lesson about how money was being spent on war and not necessarily the sanitation and governing of people in regards to their health. So if I just switch over to the actual lesson. So your homework, the Galen Review homework, which I spoke about in the last video, which should be found on Teams, is due before this lesson. So you probably already had a deadline set by your teacher, who will look through your answers and return that homework back to you on Teams. After you've done that, I may, towards the end, go through how to kind of access that homework. Actually, in fact, I'll do that right now. So when you think about your how to access your homework, what you're actually looking to do is you need to have Microsoft Teams up. That can be downloaded on your phone as an app, which is what I have, or you can literally type it in and log into your school login. You can also, on SharePoint or on your email, go to these little dots over here, and it should come up as Teams. You then will be clicking to your class, and you should have noticed already that you have the homework task, which you should have completed. So over here we have everyone who's completed their work in mine and Mr. Hinch's class. And you also would have noticed, so you also should have noticed that you also get a quiz. So this quiz is designed to be handed in to you So you will be receiving it every Friday, I believe, and that's to be done for the Monday afterwards. So you just have the weekend to do it, but it's not particularly long. And that's to be done every week, just so you have a bank of knowledge that you can always refer to. So really quickly, the easiest way is to just download this on your phone. So if we go back to our lesson now, so your homework should be completed by this lesson. So you start off with answering your low-stake quiz questions. Again, as usual, your questions will be about what you have already studied, so you use your booklet to help you find the answers to those questions. We just spoke about a few minutes ago about what medicine factors are vital to understanding medieval medicine and progress in medicine. So when we think about progress in medicine, we need to be able to assess progress by thinking about, are there improvements? Have things changed? Have things have what's in place in the Middle Ages? Is it good for people's health, people's sanitation, medical knowledge? All those are the kind of things that you need to be thinking about when you think about progress. And when you think about factors of things that may have limited or increased progress, so again, I'll say medical knowledge, systems, laws, making sure that people are healthy, diagnosis, treatment, inventions, all those things will be driven by one of these factors. So the first activity that you need to be doing is to highlight the ones you think are relevant for medieval medicine. So we did just cover that. We said that's attitudes, respect for tradition, education, institution of the church, institution of government, and role of individuals. Those are the things that we're saying are relevant to understanding progress and the lack of progress, more specifically in the Middle Ages. So the big activity here is really actually important for building your skills in this course, because you need to be able to read through each section, which is telling you how that stands as a factor. And then you just have to fill in why that's important and why that shows such limited progress or such a little change. So if we do one together, so we'll do this one here. Attitudes, respect for tradition. Due to the influence of the Catholic Church, most people had great respect for the past and traditional ideas. The Bible had great authority, as did other ancient books, like those of Hippocrates and Galen. Ideas therefore stayed the same and were very conservative. So what you have to do is fill in why you think that's important and how that piece of information will cause such little change and not any progress. So you need to really be explaining how this respect for tradition causes people to not want to make changes, not be innovative and create new things, not to question what they're being taught in university or by the church. And that's because of this respect for tradition. So you have to imagine that this over here is your evidence in a petal paragraph, and you are just completing the analysis of why this has caused such little progress. You have to do that for the next few. So we have education. Again, you just have to read it through and explain why, what is the limiting factor here? Why has that caused such little change? The church, government, role of individuals, specifically Galen. So why the kind of respect for Galen has ultimately halted progression in medicine at this time. And then I've just put in here a spare one, so a lack of communication, science, technology, and inventions, because you have to remember this was a time where those things did not really happen, and how maybe that has limited progress. Now, once you've completed that, and you need to spend some time analysing that, so if you don't have space, then I would suggest doing like an asterisk here and then writing some more information on the side or in the lesson 7 summary, because you really need to be focusing on the analysis of this section here. Now, once you finish that, what you're actually doing is you're then thinking about how the different factors are linked to each other, and you're explaining the link. So you may think, that comes quite naturally to you. For example, quite obviously, there is a link between the church and education. It's something that we focused on throughout these video lessons, the idea that the church is directly controlling education, which directly really promotes the ideas of Galen's ideas. So you should be able to create those links. So there are examples already done for you. So I'm not gonna do 1, 2, 3, and 4. But if we look over here, the link between attitudes, respect for tradition, and education is that because medieval people had a great respect for ancient books, that they studied the works of Hippocrates and Galen without questioning their ideas. And that would be the link here. You're explaining how attitudes and respect for tradition can be linked to the idea of them being educated in a way where they're only studying Galen and Hippocrates for this link. Similarly, you'd have to do the same thing for government, and education. So it's telling you where that link is. So over here it says, medieval governments raised taxes to spend on war and keeping the peace at home. They did not spend money on. So you can think about what were the problems here. What are they not spending money on? Think back to life under the Roman Empire if you're struggling, and compare that to see what they are missing out on. Thinking about sanitation and cleanliness in a town. You could also specifically be thinking about the Black Death. The ones that are left for you are actually probably the easier ones. So how does the church and respect for tradition link up? How do we link up the church and education? How do we link up education and Galen? How do we link up the church and Galen? So really, you need to be making sure that you have certain phrases like the theory of design. You need to put in all the information you know. So how long people were trained for at university. How did the church kind of make sure that there's this respect for tradition? So thinking about their dominance in the Middle Ages. And that's what you need to be doing. So for each one, you're writing an explanation to show that link, which ultimately is going to be explaining why there was such limited change in the Middle Ages. And that's because there wasn't really any progressive thought. And once you've done this, I'm just going to keep that lesson summary up for you to instead just copy in. But the big take homes of today's lesson, when we're thinking about the review of why there was such little change during the Middle Ages, ultimately it's because the church had a heavy influence over medieval society, especially medicine. So you need to be thinking about, again, like I said, theory of design, education. Galen had a strong influence over medicine, and there you've got some of his theories. And then in order for progress to begin, realistically, the only way for their progress to begin, there would have to be a change in attitude towards new ideas, which brings us on to our next topic, and the idea of the Reformation. So the Reformation is what we refer to as when there is a reform in the Catholic Church, but we'll have more of that in our first lessons on the Renaissance period. Now, finally, once you have finished that lesson summary, we have over here, so this Middle Ages key terms exercise, your teachers may have asked you to kind of fill this out at points where maybe you've you're ahead of the game and you finish a little bit earlier than everyone else, as a ongoing extension activity. But I would suggest to kind of test your knowledge on the Middle Ages to really make sure that you've completed filling in all those keywords, because they will be important not just for your assessments and in exams, but also just for your low stake quiz questions every week and the quiz questions that you're sent out via Teams. So it's important to make sure you know them. So for each one, you just have to write an explanation of what that phrase or that word actually means. And there you have lesson 7, your review on why there was such little change done. Thank you.